Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Yeah, we've got a wild one today.
We really do. I want you to imagine waking up on a stretch of blindingly white sand. You step out of your tent, and there is absolutely nothing on the horizon but the turquoise water of the Arabian Sea.
Sounds pretty perfect, honestly.
Right. A local fisherman walking down the beach gives you a friendly wave. You have no cell service, no email notifications, and statistically speaking, you are standing in one of the most tranquil, crime-free, genuinely peaceful environments on the entire planet.
You feel totally secure.
Exactly. You feel completely secure. And yet, according to the official paperwork filed by the United States government, you are currently standing in the middle of a level 4 do not travel active war zone.
Yeah, it's intense.
They say your life is in imminent danger.
Yeah.
So today, we are going somewhere that makes literally every other destination we've ever analyzed feel entirely ordinary. We're doing a deep dive into Socotra Island.
And for those pulling up a mental map right now, this island belongs to Yemen. It sits roughly 240 kilometers off the Horn of Africa in the Arabian Sea.
And the reason we are tearing through our stack of sources on this specific place today is because it might just be the ultimate travel paradox.
Oh, absolutely. It's legally accessible, but visually it is so utterly alien. I mean, its forests look like they were generated by a sci-fi art department. You've got those famous dragon's blood trees.
Yeah, the visual shock of this place is something travelers emphasize repeatedly in their notes. But we are not just here to talk about how beautiful the trees look against the skyline.
No, we really need to look at the brutal, unvarnished reality of what it actually takes to stand under one of those trees, because the logistical and financial barriers to entry here are just staggering.
They really are. I'm looking at the baseline numbers from our research, and they are eye-watering for a place with, almost no tourism infrastructure.
Right.
Just securing the mandatory guided tour is going to cost you between $1,200 and over $3,000 per person.
And that is before you even look at flights.
Exactly. On top of that, you are dealing with a society that has exactly 0 ATMs. Not one. If you run out of cash, you are entirely out of luck.
Plus, the access bottleneck is incredibly fragile. There is one and only one weekly flight onto the island.
And to prove just how precarious that single thread of access is, we have to look back at what happened in late December 2025.
Yeah, that was a disaster for a lot of people.
A sudden state of emergency was declared, all ports were abruptly closed, and that one flight was completely grounded without warning. Add in a monsoon season that literally makes the island unreachable for half the year.
And a strict rule prohibiting independent travel. I mean, it is a lot to process.
It demands a completely different mindset from the traveler. And our mission for this deep dive is to sort through all that complexity.
We are going to map out exactly who will find this incredibly difficult journey life-changing and who will profoundly regret every single dollar they spend on it.
We're also going to dissect 3 massive, specific logistical traps that routinely snare even veteran travelers. We've got 11 segments to get through today.
We have a huge stack of field reports, pricing data, and geopolitical context to cover, going chronologically through the whole experience.
So let's jump straight into that paradox I mentioned at the top, because this stopped me in my tracks. I am trying to reconcile these two opposing realities.
The safety data versus the warnings.
Yeah. We have the data showing Socotra is statistically one of the safest places to travel. People are literally sleeping safely on a beach.
Yeah.
But then you have this severe, glaring, red level 4 travel advisory from the U.S. State Department telling you not to go.
And similar warnings from the UK and Australia, yeah.
How can a place be a tranquil nature retreat and a do not travel zone at the exact same time? It's like 2 parallel universes existing at once.
Well, it requires an understanding of how bureaucratic risk assessment works versus how geographic reality works.
Okay, break that down for us.
Politically, Socotra is a governorate of Yemen. And the civil war on the Arabian mainland of Yemen is an incredibly tragic, highly complex conflict. Right.
The State Department does not issue nuanced region-by-region waivers for countries embroiled in that level of conflict. They just issue a blanket level 4 advisory for the entire sovereign territory. So bureaucratically, you are entering Yemen.
But the geographic reality is entirely different, right?
Completely different. Socotra is physically insulated from the Arabian Peninsula by an immense buffer of ocean. If you look closely at the geological maps, the island isn't even on the Arabian tectonic plate.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it broke off millions of years ago and sits on the Somali plate. So geographically and geologically, you are standing on a fragment of Africa.
That is a wild distinction. It's a political extension of the Middle East, but a geological extension of Africa. It's like a geopolitical panic room, completely disconnected from the mainland.
That is a very apt way to describe it. The physical isolation creates an absolute barrier to the conflict. The violence of the mainland civil war simply does not cross that 240-kilometer stretch of the Arabian Sea.
Which explains the travel reports.
Exactly. When we review the source material from travelers who have visited over the past few seasons, their accounts systematically dismantle the war zone narrative. They describe a profound, pervasive peace.
Yeah, we have logs of travelers waking up at dawn, going for a solo run down an empty coastal road, and the only interaction they have is a local waving at them.
But to go there, you really have to possess the psychological flexibility to hold both of those truths simultaneously. Your government considers you to be in extreme peril, while your senses tell you that you are in a sanctuary.
Psychological flexibility is one thing, but financial flexibility is another entirely. If you've accepted the bureaucratic risk, let's talk about what it actually demands from your bank account.
Because I know anyone listening right now is doing the mental math.
Oh, absolutely. We mentioned the base cost for a one-week tour runs between $1,200 and $3,000 per person.
And just to be absolutely clear, that is exclusively for the ground package. The guide, the jeep, the meals, the tent. It does not include the monumental task of actually flying to the island.
Right. Getting yourself into position to catch that one weekly charter is a completely separate financial hurdle. You have to route yourself through Abu Dhabi first.
Let's run the numbers on those international legs.
Okay, if you are flying out of Sydney, you are looking at $800 to $1,400 just to get to Abu Dhabi. Coming from London, our data shows a range of $700 to $1,100.
And if you're flying out of North America, say Toronto, expect to drop between $900 and $1,500.
So when you synthesize the tour cost with those international flights, the absolute all-in baseline for a one-week trip ranges from $2,000 to $4,500 per person.
We also pulled data from a traveler who stayed for 2 weeks to really explore the island deeply, and their reported total out-of-pocket cost was roughly $3,385.
This is a massive capital outlay.
It is, but what requires the biggest adjustment for travelers isn't even the upfront cost. It's the total evaporation of financial infrastructure once you arrive.
Yeah, this part blew my mind.
The island supports a local population of about 60 to 70,000 inhabitants. Yet there is not a single international hotel chain. There is no banking infrastructure for tourists.
The absence of ATMs isn't a temporary outage. They simply do not exist. Credit card processing machines do not exist. You cannot tap your phone to buy a bottle of water.
You are operating in a strictly physical cash environment. You have to arrive with hard US dollars or UAE dirhams in your pocket, or you have zero economic agency.
I'm trying to wrap my head around handing over $4,000 for a trip and then stepping off the plane into a society where my physical wallet is the absolute limit of my purchasing power.
It's a huge adjustment.
It begs the ultimate question, though. Why? Why jump through these massive geopolitical hoops, pay thousands of dollars, and carrying wads of cash just to go camping on an island?
Because of what that isolation has produced, the payoff is the biodiversity. The scientific community frequently refers to Socotra as the Galapagos of the Indian Ocean.
That's a big claim.
It is, but when you look at the evolutionary biology, that is not marketing hyperbole. It is a biological time capsule. When a landmass sits isolated in the ocean for millions of years, the flora and fauna are forced to adapt without any genetic interference.
Which creates endemism, meaning species that exist there and literally nowhere else in the known universe.
Right, and the stats to back that up are amazing.
Yeah, I was looking at the endemism rates in our research, and they are staggering. 37% of all the plant species on the island are endemic. 90% of the reptile species are endemic.
And then there's the snail stat.
Yes, this is the statistic that I cannot stop thinking about. 95% of the land snails on Socotra are found nowhere else on Earth.
I know nobody is booking a $4,000 plane ticket specifically to go look at a snail.
Probably not.
But it paints such a vivid picture of how deeply, profoundly isolated this ecosystem is.
It really illustrates the mechanics of evolutionary isolation perfectly. But the undisputed towering icon of this biology, the thing that actually does drive people to book those tickets, is the dragon's blood tree.
You find these primarily up in the higher altitudes, particularly the Hagir Mountains and the Dixam Plateau.
These are the trees that look like giant inside-out umbrellas.
Yeah.
Or massive, dense mushrooms.
Yeah, exactly. And that bizarre shape isn't an accident. It is an incredible evolutionary mechanism.
Socotra is fundamentally an arid desert environment, but it experiences dense morning mists rolling in off the ocean.
So the trees adapted to catch the mist.
Precisely. The flat, incredibly dense canopy is engineered to capture that mist. The moisture condenses on the waxy leaves, drips down the branches, runs down the trunk, and waters the root system in soil that otherwise sees very little rainfall.
That is brilliant. And of course, the name comes from the dark, blood-red resin that the tree bleeds when the bark is cut.
Right, which in antiquity was highly prized across the Roman and Byzantine empires as a dye, a medicine, and even a varnish.
You just won't find forests of these trees anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah.
The core takeaway for the prospective traveler is that this destination is strictly an exercise in deep nature exploration.
You are paying for unparalleled access to biology and geology. You are not going for a cultural city break.
Exactly. But that untouched ecosystem is only untouched because it is an absolute nightmare to get to. The bottleneck is severe.
It really is.
You mentioned earlier that there is only one weekly flight. I want to look at the mechanics of that. This flight has a strict maximum capacity of 174 passengers. Is that intentional conservation?
You mean like Bhutan?
Yeah, like a deliberate strategy by the local government to prevent over-tourism? Or is it just the harsh reality of their aviation infrastructure?
It is entirely infrastructural. There is no master-planned, high-minded ecotourism quota being enforced. It is simply the reality that there is only one airline willing and able to run a charter.
Wow.
And the local ground support can only handle that volume. But the secondary effect of that infrastructural failure is fascinating. It acts as a highly effective, natural anti-over-tourism filter.
So even though the plane holds 174 people, the logistical friction is so high that during the peak tourist season, fewer than 100 people visit per week.
Fewer than 100. Think about that.
It's mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Think about how many thousands of people pour out of a single cruise ship in Venice every single hour. And here, you are sharing an entire island, which is roughly the size of Majorca, with a few dozen other people.
But the catch is, you can't just decide to go whenever the mood strikes you. The weather dictates the terms of your access.
The climate controls the borders. You have a seasonal window known locally as the Kharif, which is the monsoon season. This runs from May to September.
And we need to clarify what a monsoon means in this specific geographic context. We are not talking about heavy afternoon rain showers where you can just pack a good rain jacket.
Right, it's way more extreme.
The thermal dynamics of the region create winds that consistently top 50 knots. The seas become violently unnavigable. The island is effectively unreachable and fundamentally dangerous for tourism. Tour operators simply shut down.
So they will just refuse to take your money or book a trip during those months. That entire half of the year is completely off the table.
Exactly. That leaves us with the accessible window from October through April.
And if we drill down into that, the research points to a very specific sweet spot, November through February. This is when the weather stabilizes into a really comfortable 25 to 30 degrees Celsius.
Which is about 77 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah, and the humidity drops off, which is crucial because you're going to be doing a lot of hiking and sleeping in tents.
Outside of that core winter window, you have the fringe months. March and April start getting significantly hotter, but paradoxically, the island gets busier.
Because travelers are trying to squeeze their trips in right before the monsoon shuts the door in May.
Exactly. And on the other end, you have October, which is the reopening month after the winds die down. This creates a very distinct pricing dynamic based on demand.
Okay, how did the pricing shift?
If you are willing to risk the early October window, just as the operators are dusting off their gear, you can find tour prices dropping to that $1,200 to $1,500 floor.
But if you want the guaranteed perfect weather of peak December or January,
then you are competing for those limited flight seats, and the tour price will spike to $2,500 or even over $3,000.
But if we were talking about December, we have to look at the December 2025 emergency. Because from where we sit now in mid-2026 analyzing this, that event changes the entire calculus of the trip.
It really does. It was a massive disruption.
In late December 2025, there was a sudden, sweeping state of emergency declared. All the ports of entry were abruptly closed. The commercial flights were canceled without any prior notice to the operators or the passengers.
And it instantly triggered an active security alert from the U.S. government.
So what is the fundamental lesson there for someone attempting to plan this trip?
The lesson is that the concept of travel flexibility does not exist here. If you are a traveler who likes to pivot, who relies on last-minute flight changes, this destination will break you.
Yeah, you can't just expect a customer service desk to reroute you through a different hub.
Exactly.
The December 2025 closure proved that geopolitical shifts happen instantaneously. If the island's ports shut down while you were scheduled to fly, or worse, while you are already there, you have absolutely zero recourse.
There's no consular support. Your embassy is not going to send a helicopter for you, and they cannot compel the airline to refund your money.
You are relying 100% on the integrity and competence of your local tour operator to navigate the fallout. It really underscores why vetting your operator is the single most critical decision of the entire planning process.
Speaking of planning, let's talk about the physical endurance required just to get to that one fragile flight. We need to trace the actual routes because getting to the starting line is an expedition in itself.
Oh, the routing is brutal. Let's say you are a listener based in Sydney or Melbourne. You're looking at roughly 20 hours of total transit time.
So you had to take a long-haul carrier like Emirates into Dubai or Abu Dhabi and then connect over to the Air Arabia charter.
Right. If you are starting in London, it's a slightly easier 14 hours total, routing through Abu Dhabi.
But if you are coming from North America, say Toronto, or from Auckland, New Zealand, you need to mentally prepare for a grueling 24-hour day of continuous travel each way.
And there is a hard, inflexible rule hidden in the logistics that applies to everyone, regardless of where they start.
Every single traveler must overnight in Abu Dhabi before the charter flight to Socotra. It is a structural necessity of the schedule.
Because the Air Arabia charter departs early in the morning, the inbound long-haul flights from major hubs simply do not land early enough to allow for a same-day connection.
We'll talk about this more later. But attempting to bypass this overnight stay is the quickest way to destroy your entire trip. But for now, understand that an Abu Dhabi hotel stay is mandatory.
So you've endured the 20 hours of flying, you've done the mandatory overnight in the UAE, you finally board the Air Arabia charter.
I want to focus on the exact moment the plane touches down. Because based on the traveler accounts in our sources, the first impression of Socotra is jarring in a way most people aren't prepared for.
The arrival experience completely subverts modern travel expectations. The charter lands at a small, incredibly basic regional airstrip in Hadibo, the island's capital.
And when you step out onto the tarmac, the defining characteristic that hits you isn't chaos, right? It isn't a wall of aggressive taxi touts.
No, it's profound silence. There are no massive air-conditioned resort buses idling at the curb. There are no bright digital welcome boards. You walk out, and your local guide is simply standing there waiting for you.
And from that second forward, that local guide is your entire logistical universe. They are your transport, your translator, your chef, and your navigator.
I love how one traveler described it in the field notes. They said it felt like stepping off a spaceship onto a newly discovered planet.
Yeah, where the people who sent you know you're there, but the planet itself is completely indifferent to your arrival.
And that intense feeling of isolation only magnifies once you leave the airstrip. The drive from Hadibo up into the interior, specifically to the Dixam Plateau, takes about 2 hours.
You start on sealed tarmac, but that quickly degrades into a deeply rutted, rough dirt track.
Yeah.
But then you get the payoff.
The big reveal.
Exactly. You crest the edge of the plateau, and suddenly the landscape opens up, and you are staring at hundreds of these bizarre mushroom-shaped dragon's blood trees set against the jagged 1,500-meter peaks of the Hagir Mountains.
Travelers call it overwhelming.
It is a profound aesthetic shock.
Mm.
But we also need to balance that high with a very grounded reality check regarding the capital city.
Yeah, we have to manage expectations about Hadibo. It's an ugly, functional logistics hub.
Right. If a traveler arrives expecting the capital to be a charming, historic Middle Eastern town, something with winding alleyways, spice markets, and boutique cafes like you might find in Oman, they need to recalibrate immediately.
Hadibo is strictly functional. It is a working, dusty port town. It is comprised of basic concrete block buildings, intense fish markets, and dirt streets.
There are 0 tourist cafes. You aren't going to find a place to sit with a latte and people watch. If you actually choose to spend a night in Hadibo rather than camping, the accommodation is extremely basic.
A clean, functional guest house is going to run you $40 to $60 a night.
You have to make a massive mindset shift before you even board the flight in Abu Dhabi. You have to categorize this trip strictly as camping and nature travel.
If you expect a curated resort experience in the pounds, you will be miserable.
Which naturally brings us to the question of where you are actually sleeping. Since Hadibo isn't where you want to spend your week, what are the accommodation options?
The overarching rule, as we established, is the total absence of international hospitality brands. Instead, the infrastructure dictates 4 distinct types of accommodation.
Let's break those down. Type 1 is beach camping. This is going to be the nightly reality for the vast majority of travelers on those mid-range tours.
You are sleeping in dome tents pitched directly on the sand at places like Qalansiyah, Schwab Bay, and Shab.
And I want to emphasize this heavily based on the sources. Sleeping in a tent on the beach is not a compromise because you couldn't afford a hotel. It is the highlight of the trip.
You are falling asleep to the sound of the ocean with miles of empty white sand in either direction and absolutely zero light pollution.
Type 2 is the Hadibo guest house, which we just touched on. These are small, family-run spots like the Lazarina Hotel. They charge that $40 to $70 nightly rate.
You get a private room, a spinning ceiling fan, and a simple breakfast. It is vital to note the emphasis on the fan. Air conditioning is rare and unreliable due to power fluctuations.
And Wi-Fi is virtually non-existent once you leave the town center. These guest houses serve purely as functional pit stops, a place to take a rudimentary shower before heading back into the wilderness.
Type 3 changes the environment entirely. Plateau and mountain camps. These are the elevated sites set up in places like Dixam and the Hajir Mountains.
The views are incredible, but there is a major packing warning here. If you are visiting during the peak season in January, you cannot just pack board shorts and t-shirts.
Because of the elevation, the temperature drops drastically at night. You will need warm fleece layers and a good sleeping bag.
But the reward for enduring the cold is access to the best stargazing you will likely ever see.
Finally, we have Type 4, which is the high-end private tour. We found operators like Polaris Travel charging from 20,000 British pounds.
That is roughly 25,000 US dollars for a week. The existence of a $25,000 tier on an island with no luxury hotels requires a careful explanation.
It does. It is crucial to understand what that capital actually buys. You are not paying for marble bathrooms, infinity pools, or high thread count linens.
What are you buying then?
You are paying for exclusive, high-end logistical engineering. That price secures bespoke service. A private mobile camp that is set up exclusively for your group, access to the island's top-tier naturalist guides, and a level of culinary planning that mitigates the island's natural friction.
You are buying friction-free access to a high-friction environment. It's fascinating. You are essentially paying the price of a new car to sleep in a tent, but it's the most perfectly orchestrated tent experience on Earth.
Exactly.
Okay, so whether you are shivering in a standard sleeping bag or resting in a bespoke mobile camp, you still need calories to fuel these intense off-road days. Let's look at the food, the groceries, and the local etiquette.
I know you always look at destinations through the lens of food. Is this a place for someone who travels to eat?
Based on the deep dive, absolutely not. Anyone approaching Socotra as a culinary destination will be severely disappointed.
The food ecosystem here is fundamentally about survival and sustenance, deeply tied to the island's maritime culture. It is honest, nutritious, and highly localized.
When you are traversing the island with your tour group, your guides act as your chefs. The standard culinary experience involves the guides purchasing or catching fresh fish, building an open fire on the beach, and grilling the catch right there on the sand.
And that's served alongside massive, calorie-dense portions of rice, flatbreads, dates, and incredibly potent sweet black tea.
I mean, it is simple sustenance, but eating a fish that was pulled out of the ocean an hour ago sounds incredibly appealing to me. And the economics of this food are fascinating.
If you are walking through the market in Adibo, the local currency is the Yemeni rial. The exchange rate hovers around 550 to 600 reals to $1 US.
The purchasing power of a Western currency is immense. A standard meal at a local spot will cost you $2 to $4 US. You can buy a full kilogram of fresh, whole fish straight from the market for under $3.
If a traveler was somehow braving the logistics to self-cater in Adibo, they could easily feed themselves on $10 to $15 a day.
But the reality of self-catering is incredibly bleak due to extreme supply scarcity. The island does not possess Western-style supermarkets.
You will not find sprawling aisles of imported dry goods or specialized ingredients. The retail infrastructure consists of small, local stall shops that carry bottled water, biscuits, and simple tinned goods,
which creates a critical, highly actionable mandate for the traveler. You must bring your own pharmacy. If you rely on specific over-the-counter medications, allergy pills, ibuprofen, or daily vitamin supplements, you must purchase them in Abu Dhabi and bring them with you.
You cannot assume the local pharmacy will have what you need. Furthermore, you must respect the dietary baseline of the island. Socotra strictly adheres to Islamic dietary laws.
Meaning absolutely no pork and absolutely no alcohol. If you have severe dietary restrictions beyond those parameters, like a strict vegan diet, it must be meticulously coordinated with your tour operator months in advance.
That dietary reality segues perfectly into the broader cultural etiquette, because the culture dictates how you must behave as a guest. Socotra is a deeply conservative, traditional Muslim society.
What are the non-negotiable rules of engagement? First, dress codes matter. When you are in Hadibo or passing through any of the smaller villages, both men and women must ensure their shoulders and knees are fully covered.
Second, photography. You cannot treat the local population like scenery. You must always, without exception, ask for explicit permission before taking photographs of anyone.
Understanding the broader context behind these rules is vital. The island's geographic isolation hasn't just preserved ancient trees, it has preserved a highly authentic, fragile cultural ecosystem.
The local population is exceptionally hospitable to outsiders, but that hospitality is a two-way street predicated on mutual respect. Observing these cultural norms is what maintains this dynamic.
If waves of foreign travelers start treating Socotra like a careless spring break destination, that genuine authenticity will be eroded very rapidly. Being a good guest is part of the conservation effort.
I think that's a brilliant way to frame it. Respecting the culture is as important as not cutting down the trees.
So with your food, your transportation, and your beach campsite largely bundled into the upfront fee by your tour operator, how does the actual daily financial math work out? Let's break down the daily out-of-pocket budget across different traveler profiles.
Because the traditional method of budgeting, where you calculate a hotel night plus 3 restaurant meals, just does not apply here.
Right. It doesn't apply because of the structural reliance on the bundled tour. You are essentially paying a daily burn rate for total life support on the island. Let's start with the backpacker tier.
We have to completely redefine what budget means in this context. The absolute minimum viable tour package you can secure is between $1,200 and $1,500.
When you add the mandatory international flights, which add another $800 to $1,400, the absolute bare bones all-in cost for a single week lands between $2,000 and $2,900.
If we divide that out, a budget traveler is burning $285 to $415 per day.
If I tell a traditional backpacker who is used to spending $40 a day in Southeast Asia that their daily budget is over $300, they would laugh in my face.
But the context is everything. That $400 a day isn't just a bed, it includes literally everything. Your 4WD transport across brutal terrain, your meals, your camping gear, and a dedicated local guide ensuring your survival.
It completely changes the value proposition. Moving up, we have the mid-range tier, which the data shows is the most common way travelers experience the island. The tour cost jumps to $1,800 to $2,500.
Add in the flights, and your daily breakdown lands securely between $350 and $480 per day, completely all-inclusive.
The financial burden shifts dramatically when we look at the family tier. Let's run a conservative model for a family of 4. The base tour cost multiplies rapidly, ballooning to anywhere from $7,200 to $10,000.
Add the cost of 4 international flights, which will consume another $3,200 to $5,600. A family is looking at a massive capital commitment of $10,000 to $15,600 for a single week of off-grid camping.
That is a staggering investment for a family vacation. And then, of course, we have the luxury tier we discussed, where you are handing over $25 grand to operators like Polaris.
But I want to look at a different profile. What about the digital nomad? We constantly analyze destinations for remote workers who want to stay for a month or more. How does Socotra work for them?
The hard, uncompromising truth is that Socotra is an absolute dead zone for the digital nomad lifestyle. The required infrastructure does not exist.
There are no co-working spaces, the local cellular data is painfully slow, and there is no provision for long-stay remote work visas. You cannot work from this island.
The only viable workaround for a nomad is to establish a base in Dubai where monthly living costs will be around $2,500 to $4,000, and treat Socotra as a distinct, strictly offline, one-week expedition add-on.
It is a vacation from your nomad base, not a new place to work.
Okay, so the math makes logical sense once you understand the bundle. But here is the terrifying part of the research. Even if you have budgeted perfectly, your entire trip can completely disintegrate if you fall into one of 3 specific traps.
The sources highlight 3 named logistics traps that routinely catch people off guard. Let's start with Trap 1, the Abu Dhabi overnight ambush.
We hinted at this earlier, but let's thoroughly explain why this ruins trips.
The mechanism is entirely dictated by unyielding flight schedules. The Seoul Air Arabia charter flight departs from Abu Dhabi very early in the morning.
Right.
However, the inbound connecting flights arriving from major global hubs invariably land in the UAE too late in the day or evening to successfully make that morning connection.
The reality of this trap is devastating. If you assume you can just run through the airport and make a tight connection, and you miss that single fixed weekly flight, you do not just lose a day of your vacation, you lose the entire trip. There was no backup flight.
The fix for this trap is incredibly simple, but it is strictly mandatory. You must factor in $90 to $150 for an airport hotel in Abu Dhabi the night before your charter. Do not try to be a hero with a tight layover.
Treat that hotel room as the non-negotiable step 1 of your expedition. Trap 2 is what the field reports call the cash cliff. The mechanism here is what we discussed earlier, the absolute total absence of banking infrastructure.
The reality of the cash cliff becomes apparent when the unexpected occurs. Your tour covers the baseline, but what if you want to buy extra bottled water? What if you find a local artisan selling unique crafts?
Or tipping. Tipping your guide and driver is culturally expected and highly encouraged. If you hit the cash cliff and only have a Visa card in your pocket, you are entirely out of luck.
The required fix is to carry a physical reserve of $300 to $500 per person in cash, completely separate from your tour payment. Both US dollars and UAE dirhams are widely accepted, but you must have the physical paper bills in your hand before you board the plane in Abu Dhabi.
Which brings us to the most severe trap. Trap 3, the Dixam emergency window. We talked about the sudden port closures in late 2025.
The context is stark. When that December 30th closure hit, travelers who had fully paid for their January 2026 trips were left entirely stranded, with absolutely no official recourse or government assistance.
This is exactly where standard travel planning collapses. If you purchase a generic travel insurance policy from a standard provider, it will be entirely useless to you.
Because the US and UK governments maintain that Level 4 do not travel advisory for Yemen, standard insurance policies contain clauses that instantly void your coverage the second you cross into Yemeni airspace.
The mechanism to fix this is highly specific. You must explicitly seek out and purchase specialist adventure insurance. The source material explicitly names providers capable of this, specifically world nomads or battleface.
You must secure a policy that explicitly covers travel to Yemen as a declared war zone, and crucially, you must verify that it covers financial losses due to government-imposed closures and the massive costs of emergency medical evacuations.
Do not wire a single dollar to a tour operator without having this specific coverage confirmed in writing. Mentioning war zone insurance forces us to have a very direct conversation about safety, solo travel, and physical comfort.
We cannot dance around the elephant in the room. Yemen is embroiled in a catastrophic, multi-year civil war. The Level 4 advisory is incredibly serious.
It does, and our analysis in no way minimizes the profound severity and tragedy of the situation on the mainland. However, as an analytical exercise, we must constantly contrast that mainland reality with the deep geographical isolation of Socotra.
When I evaluate the safety data over the past several years, the data clearly shows the island functions as a separate entity. We must hold those two truths. The sovereign nation is in a state of conflict, but this offshore territory remains genuinely tranquil.
So how does that translate for someone who wants to go alone? For solo traveler, the logistics are actually highly manageable, but only because true independent travel is impossible.
Because you are required to book through an operator, you are inherently enveloped in a small group, usually 8 to 15 people. That group structure almost entirely mitigates the standard vulnerabilities you would face trying to navigate a remote region by yourself.
And the data regarding solo female travelers is notably positive. As we established, conservative dress is strictly required in the towns, but the social rules relax significantly once the group is out in the remote beach camps.
There are virtually zero reported incidents of harassment. This safety is a byproduct of the cultural insularity combined with a deeply ingrained tradition of local hospitality. However, I strongly advise relying on the established group tour structure rather than attempting to circumvent the rules.
What about families? I want to issue a serious comfort warning here. Let's look at the daily reality. The sanitation infrastructure is minimal to non-existent at the camps. You are spending hours every day getting kidney punched in the back of a 4WD vehicle navigating brutal dirt tracks.
There is absolutely no guarantee of a hot shower for days at a time. The verdict for families is therefore deeply polarized.
If you have nature-obsessed teenagers who love roughing it, this could be the most transformative, perspective-shifting trip of their adolescence.
But if you are thinking about bringing children under 12, or if your family's baseline for a vacation requires resort-style relaxation and predictable plumbing, It is a terrible idea. Do not subject young children to this level of logistical friction.
The lack of comfort extends to the medical reality. There are no Western standard hospitals on the island. There is a rudimentary clinic in Adibo capable of handling minor issues.
If a traveler suffers a major physical trauma from a fall or a severe illness, they must be medically evacuated by air to a facility in Oman or the UAE.
This loops directly back to the absolute necessity of that specialized war zone medical evacuation insurance. It also requires travelers to take personal responsibility for their health by packing a highly comprehensive personal medical kit.
Stocked with everything necessary to treat severe gastrointestinal issues to basic trauma and wound care until an evacuation can be arranged.
Okay, so you've accepted the risks. You've paid the premium for the battle phase insurance. You've accepted the rough roads, the lack of hot water, and the anxiety of the cash cliff. When you get to the end of the week, what makes you actually glad you endured all of it?
Let's dive into the best moments and honest disappointments. Based on the aggregate field reports, best moment number 1 is, unequivocally, standing on the Dixam Plateau at golden hour.
Picture the geometry of the landscape. You are standing among hundreds of these ancient, bizarrely shaped dragon's blood trees. As the sun begins to dip behind the mountains, the light turns this deep, rich, saturated amber.
It creates an aesthetic experience that is literally impossible to replicate anywhere else on Earth. And the best part, access to that moment is completely included in your base tour cost.
Best moment number 2 shifts the focus to the coastline. The visual impact of Qalansiyah Lagoon and Shu'aib Bay. The contrast is spectacular. You have these brilliant, luminous turquoise waters pushing up against stark, blindingly white sand spits.
Accessing the absolute best parts, like Shu'aib Bay, usually requires hiring a local fisherman for a boat excursion. That will add about $30 to $50 per person to your out-of-pocket costs. But the visual return on that investment is consistently described as rivaling the top-tier, most exclusive beaches globally.
And best moment number 3 requires no travel during the day at all. It's the stargazing. Because the island possesses zero light pollution, there are no streetlights illuminating the roads, no neon signs in the towns. The Milky Way is fully, vividly visible to the naked eye.
What struck me as so profound in our research notes is how frequently travelers cite this completely free, passive experience as the most emotionally powerful part of the entire expedition.
But our mandate is to provide the unvarnished truth, which means we must equally weigh the honest disappointments. Honest disappointment number 1 brings us back to Adibo.
We have warned you about this, but it bears repeating so expectations are properly anchored. It is an ugly, dusty, purely functional logistics hub. It does not possess the historic charm or architectural beauty of a city like Muscat in Oman. You go to Adibo to resupply your water. You do not go there to sightsee.
Honest disappointment number 2 is the sheer physical toll. The heavily curated Instagram photos of a traveler standing serenely under a dragon's blood tree entirely crop out the reality of getting there.
They don't show the exhausting, bone-rattling full-day drives over incredibly rough terrain. They don't capture the gritty feeling of going 3 days without a proper shower.
Or the unexpected mental fatigue that sets in from total digital isolation if you haven't prepared yourself for a week without a smartphone.
And honest disappointment number 3 is the persistent psychological tax of access uncertainty. There's a constant looming threat of a random sudden government closure, exactly mirroring the events of late 2025.
You can execute your planning flawlessly, spend thousands of dollars on non-refundable flights, pack perfectly, and still have the entire trip dissolved at the very last minute due to a geopolitical shift entirely out of your control. That underlying anxiety is a permanent feature of choosing this destination.
So let's say those disappointments, the total lack of charm in the built environment, the severe physical exhaustion, or the massive anxiety of that looming access uncertainty, let's say those are absolute deal breakers for you. What are the alternatives?
I want to look at destinations that offer a similar visual and geographic vibe, but with a fraction of the friction. Where else can you go?
The most logical alternative is to look to the immediate north, Oman's Dhofar region, specifically the area surrounding the city of Salah. Why choose Salah? Because it delivers incredible, sweeping Arabian Sea landscapes, a deep, rich history tied to the ancient frankincense trade, and very low tourist density.
But crucially, it delivers all of that with the modern conveniences of ATMs, international standard hotels, and absolute zero adjacency to an active war zone.
The massive draw for Salalah is actually their version of the Kharif season. It runs from June to September. But unlike Socotra, where the monsoon winds just make the island dangerous and unreachable, The monsoon moisture in Salalah hits the coastal mountains and turns the harsh desert supernaturally green.
And the financial and logistical costs are so much more manageable. You can get flights from London for around $450. A highly comfortable, solid hotel will run you $80 to $150 a night. Your entire daily budget, including food and transport, is $180 to $350.
So you can execute a highly comfortable mid-range week for $1,500 to $2,500 all in. The fundamental trade-off is biological. By choosing Salah, you lose the dragon's blood trees, you lose the extreme endemism.
You are trading that highly specific alien biology for total infrastructural comfort and complete geopolitical peace of mind. But if you still want extreme isolation, Alternative 2 is also located in Oman, the Masira Islands.
Why choose Masira? It offers intense, profound isolation. You get miles of completely empty beaches. And it happens to be the loggerhead turtle nesting capital of the world. Plus, getting there is relatively simple. It's just a 30-minute ferry ride from the Omani mainland coast.
The economics are even more appealing. Flights from London to Muscat run $350 to $600. Your daily budget on the island is a very manageable $120 to $200. You could easily pull off a fully baked one-week trip for $800 to $1,400.
The trade-off with Masira is aesthetic. It is significantly less dramatically alien than Socotra. The landscapes are stark, windswept, and beautiful, but they do not possess that surreal sci-fi quality. However, you are securing deep isolation at less than half the financial cost and with zero political or insurance risk.
All right, we have covered the tectonic geography, the massive costs, the biology of the trees, the insurance traps, and the alternatives. It is time to synthesize all of this data and finally answer the core question of the deep dive across all traveler profiles. Is it worth it? Let's run the final matrix. First, the backpacker verdict.
Technically, yes, but only if the traveler is willing to fundamentally redefine what backpacking means. If your definition of backpacking is rooted in spontaneous freedom, waking up, deciding your route over breakfast, and hopping between cheap hostels, you will find Socotra deeply frustrating.
The required group tour strips away that autonomy, but is spending $2,000 to $2,900 for a strictly guided, completely mapped-out week of total, raw authenticity sounds like an incredible value proposition to you, then you should absolutely go.
What about the mid-range verdict? This is the bulk of the market. This is the absolute sweet spot for the destination. For the mid-range traveler, it is an absolute yes.
When you analyze the $350 to $480 per day all-inclusive cost, it actually rivals the daily burn rate of a standard mid-range week in a popular nature destination like Iceland.
But what Socotra delivers for that price is a totally uncommercialized, profoundly raw wilderness experience that is becoming vanishingly rare on a global scale.
Moving to the family verdict.
A very strict, highly conditional yes. For the right family, specifically those with older teenagers who are deeply invested in wildlife, hiking, and roughing it, it can be a perspective-shifting, life-changing experience.
But for the wrong family, it'll be an expensive $15,000 misery. If you are traveling with children under 12, or if anyone in your family unit requires high physical comfort, climate control, and predictable plumbing, you must stay away.
The luxury verdict. It is worth it, provided the luxury client understands the definition of the word in this specific context. Luxury here means paying $25,000 plus for expert private expedition access.
It means absolute exclusivity, total isolation, and the deployment of top-tier naturalist guides just for you. It does not mean high thread count sheets, infinity pools, or cocktail menus. You're buying access, not amenities.
Finally, the digital nomad and solo verdict. For working nomads, it is an unequivocal NO. The total lack of internet infrastructure makes executing remote work impossible.
But for the solo adventure traveler who has $2,500 to $3,500 to deploy, it is an unequivocal yes. The mandatory group format brilliantly mitigates the safety and logistical risks of navigating the region alone, while still delivering a completely unparalleled adventure.
As we wrap up this deep dive, my mind keeps returning to that initial image of stepping off the plane onto a planet that doesn't care you are there. We live in an era where mass tourism has relentlessly mapped, paved, and commercialized almost every single corner of the globe. Everything is accessible. Everything is easy.
Which leaves us with a final, highly provocative question to consider long after we finish. We look at the massive financial cost, the grueling logistical nightmares, the terrifying government warnings, and the absolute uncompromising lack of infrastructure as negatives.
But are those immense barriers to entry actually the only things keeping Socotra's magic alive?
If a developer built an international airport with daily flights from London and put a luxury resort right on the white sands of Schwab Bay, making it perfectly safe and easy to get to, would we even want to go?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.